Hi, billionaires. Today, we're talking about how you get yourself to do the things you know you should do to move towards your goals and stop just saying, this is who I am. Today, we're talking about nurture versus nature. I'm Ali Davar.
And I'm Emily Montiel, and you're listening to Billion and Better. So we're talking about nature versus nurture. And interestingly, I was reading something from this psychiatrist that I follow, and she said, so many of the things that we chalk up to just being like our personality traits are actually learned behaviors, or in some circumstances learned like almost defense mechanisms to things we've experienced in our life. And we so quickly say, that's just who I am, that's just how I am, by nature. And sometimes it's not really nature. It's kind of like an unintentional nurture, I guess, like from life experience. And it really got me reflecting on my own self and the things that I have always said, oh, that's just who I am. Like, is it really that, or is it a response to something that I've experienced in life?
Yeah. A lot of times I do think it is like you adopting your identity. It's not really who you are. I think that really at the very depth of our soul, we're just like full of love and like maybe a lot more like neutral to a lot of things. Like I was talking to one of my friends a few days ago, and she says, yeah, well, I'm usually pessimistic about these stuff. And I was like, when did you decide that you're pessimistic? Because I had heard somebody say exactly what you just said right now. And I think about myself, like, when do we think we're conservative or not conservative or this or that? There has been experiences where I went and traveled one time with one of my friends. She called and she's like, hey, we're going to, Cabo in Mexico. You want to come? It's very spontaneous. I only know her. And in any lifetime, I would always just automatically, naturally would say no, right? And that's probably fear rather than I'm busy, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I just like, no. But it was during COVID and there was like nothing going on and you're sitting at home. You're like, okay, yes, let's go. And as soon as I said yes, I'm like, why did I say that? And that experience really changed my perspective towards a lot. Like travel more, be open more, say yes more. So it's like you might say to yourself that, yeah, no, I'm like this. But there are experiences that can definitely change you. So are you really like that, or are you just like kind of following a certain path of behavior that you're used to, right?
Yeah. And so in that respect, like thinking on the macro level, is there anything that we are kind of innately, like by, as people would say, by nature, I'm this way? And what's interesting about that concept is we usually don't begin to define ourselves until we have like enough of a cognitive development to really like recognize ourselves as an individual. And infants, even toddlers, there's definitely a period of development where they recognize that, hey, I'm not just an extension of this person that I'm always with, mom, dad, whatever, but I am me. And you start to kind of frame who you are in your mind. And by that time, you've already had experiences. The infant has had experiences that will probably leave a lasting mark. I know you say like literally almost everything that happens to you in life is somewhere in your brain even before you realize it. Mm-hmm. And toddlers have definitely had experiences that shape who they are. So what is the nature side of that, because we don't say, oh, I'm this way, I say no, or, I'm feisty or whatever it might be until we're old enough, mature enough to say those things. So when is nature the driving factor for how we are versus a nurture situation?
Yeah, I think in the conversation about business, a lot of people want to ask themselves this question because I think, at least for me, there's this belief like deep down that you're questioning. Am I just the way I am, or can I change that? Mm-hmm. Can I improve in certain areas? Can I really devote a few years to this thing and get really good at it? Or am I just fooling myself? This is just exactly how I am. And I think that's where that conversation starts for a lot of us. And it goes into like, so a lot of times with fear, you're like, well, that's just the way I am, mm-hmm. right? Protecting yourself mm-hmm. against maybe certain things that I have to go to improve. So I think first underneath all of that is really paying attention to the belief that am I just the way I am, or this is a belief I like duplicated from somebody that really helps in my life, like believing that practice and repetition will make you better. Believing that humans are an adaptation machine, meaning like look around the world. We are everywhere. We are the apex predators in the world. We're anywhere from the deserts to the North Pole and the cold places and the hot places and the mountains. Like we go there, we adapt, and we thrive and we conquer, right? So as human beings, we're very good at adapting. But now but I think more importantly is individually, like a lot of species are good at adapting within generations, right? Like, you take I'm not that good in biology, but you take like an animal, like, and within several generations, it's going to biologically look a little bit different to adapt to this environment. Humans are good at adapting within the same, like, I don't need to go to a second generation or third generation. I can adapt myself. Psychologically and physically. Physically is easier to understand because we can see it. I can go to the gym, lift weights, no matter how I look. If I follow certain rules, I'm going to look different, right?
Well, even the concept of like, you move somewhere cold, you just dress differently to warm your body, whereas an animal, like through generations, they might develop more layers of fat biologically or different fur, but we just instantly put a coat on and boom, I'm adapted and ready to go.
Yeah, and I think like even at a deeper level, we also biologically adapt. So there's this swimmer, I don't know her name, but if you look it up, will come up. She wanted to swim the space, the body of water between Alaska and Russia, which is considered like the coldest water.
Yeah.
And she trained and she trained and trained. And she would train, swim in the cold water. She would sleep in the freezing cold with like windows open. And if you study her body, after a while, she started having more brown fat in her body than any other. So her body started adapting because brown fat is more like thermodynamic. It just keeps cold like better, or keep hot, like heating the body better. So this person biologically just adapted within like, I don't know how long, but like within the same person. It was in a different generation. And yes, then we have technology and we use our brains to like have coats and like maybe she wore the swimsuit that's like really hugging the skin. So, but my body is really adapting. So that's easy to understand, but it's hard to understand that your mind also works the same way. If I think good things, I'm going to adapt a little bit towards that. If I'm more open-minded, I'm going to adapt towards that. If I constantly tell myself that, hey, I'm not a risk taker. Well, my brain is listening to me, and it's gonna take actions that are really aligning with that. And over time, I become somebody that's just really is that, right? But that's not who I am naturally. That's who I've decided to be, right?
How do you kind of understand who you are naturally versus what you've kind of nurtured or been nurtured to become? I know personally, I've done a lot of self-reflection lately on how forceful I come across with things, especially things I'm passionate about and believe in. And it's easier for me to say it. That's just who I am naturally by default. That's how I've always been, and I want to be true to myself. But thinking through it, the lens of getting better and improving, and I am what I tell myself, like, I'm so curious, like, what is my natural state? Because for so long, I've either been told this by somebody else or told it to myself that I'm questioning, is that me, really? Or is that what I've adapted to be? So how do you pare down, what is nature versus nurture in yourself or somebody else?
Yeah, so I'm not an expert, but this is what comes to my mind. If there's different parts of us, and there's like, there's certain ways I like to behave in certain areas and times. So if I'm saying, hey, I'm more naturally like this, but there's something in me that's probably driving me towards the opposite of that. So this is what I mean. If I question what am I naturally, like I am where I stand with my views, or where I stand like with my development and nurture versus nurture, is still exactly who I am, right? So I was born a certain way with certain, leaning towards certain traits, and environment and growing up just wired me to be a certain ways. And now today, that's exactly who I am. But I might look at myself and say, I like to be a little bit more like this. Mm-hmm. That gap is where we start to question of like, am I really like this? Is because you want to be like something else, and you're looking at where you are and saying, this might be just exactly who I am, and going there might not be possible. That's at least what comes to my mind, where that's where we start to question, am I really like this, or can I adapt? And I think if the belief underneath is that humans are the ultimate adaptation machine, if I put time and effort, I will get better at anything I want, by a lot. then I don't have that fear as much. Then I can say, hey, I am naturally like this. I'm somebody who says no a lot, but I like to say yes more. And it's going to be scary in the beginning, but the more I do it, the more I get used to it. And when there's positive experiences that come with that, I'm tend to say it more often and like that. And if there's negative experiences that come on that, I need to be aware that I might say, well, you see, I was right? Like I need to like always leave room for that thought. So I really think is understanding, hey, why do I feel this way? If I want to go that way, like what's the person I want to be like and what actions do I need to take to be more like that? Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it makes me think like back to the beginning of all of us, coming into this world when a baby is born and you're like, okay, this because of the parents or the grandparents or whatever, this child, like I think we have assumptions of how a child could grow up to be, not necessarily how they will, but how they could. They might be artistic, like their father, or creative, or assertive, strong-minded, because of we assume DNA. But like as I reflect in my own life, and even like my own daughter with my husband, and I'm like, oh, you're just like I always say, tú eres tu papa, which in Spanish means you are your dad. Because she's just like him, and I'm like, wow, look at that genetics at play. But it makes me think maybe no, it's just the influence. She's with him every day, and she picks up mannerisms, behaviors, and tendencies because of being influenced. So when I relate that to business, if that is in fact the truth, two things. It makes me think that nature doesn't really have as strong of a hand as nurture and experience does, and nature is almost irrelevant. And two, when I relate it to business, it's I think what popped in my head when you were talking was that quote, like, be the change you wish to see in the world, or be the good you want to see in the world. And I think people interpret that, at least I did until I started thinking about it in this way of like, don't just wait around and wait for somebody else to inspire change or good. Just do it yourself. Like, be the one that is the change maker. But really now when it comes to business, it's like, okay, I attack things very forcefully. I want to attack them slower, calmer, more methodically, whatever it is. I should seek to surround myself with people that are more like how I want to be, because we have such a strong influence on people. Likewise, if I want my team to demonstrate certain behaviors and behave in a certain way, I can influence that more quickly by being that way myself. It's like the leading by example.
Sure.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what comes to my mind is like the influence. I think that's even how like company culture comes to be, right? Mm-hmm. I was listening to something the other day that said like company culture comes strictly from the people who have the strongest influence in the organization, the behaviors, mannerisms, and things that they do that literally set the tone for what's acceptable for everybody else. And that's just purely influence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Purely influence.
Absolutely.
So where does I'm like, where does nature come into play?
Yeah, so great question, because like you said earlier, like thinking that, hey, nurture maybe not doesn't even play that big of a role, influence or environment matters. I think really understanding why we're having this discussion in the world of business, what's the utility of it, is one conversation versus what's reality, what's really going on. Like I'm interested in like understanding scientifically what's really going on, all of that. But there comes a point where what's the use of this? So there's a lot of people out there that have a lot of different opinions on this, but I think one of the best ones I've heard is probably 50-50. 50% of who you are is your nature. It's how you're born. It's your DNA. It's your just, genetics. The other 50% is your environment and your influence. Now, let's say you want to be an athlete versus you want to go into business versus like you want to be an artist. Maybe nature plays different role, right, in those areas for different people. However, at the end of the day, the only thing that matters, it comes into the point where it doesn't matter what percentage is nurture versus nature. It's what do I do from this point on, right? I am the way I am naturally to this point, and now I want to go over here. So I think now do I change it? I think first comes with the belief that I can change that. I can become better, more skillful, become more of who I want to be like. And believing the more steps I take towards that, the easier it gets, the better it gets. It's like going to the gym. Day one, when I go and lift weights, nothing is going to change. But after 3 months, I can see some changes. And after a year, oh man, I can really see a lot of changes. And after a decade, it's just who I am. It's part of my DNA. I talk to a lot of people that, we had this gentleman just started working with us and he looks jacked. right? And I'm like, Sean, what do you do at the gym? And he's just like, nothing. When do you work out? I don't know, here and there. Like his answers are like my answers. I'm like, I should be bigger than you. But because he's been doing it for year after year after year, he's just maintaining it. And that's easy to understand always in the body. It's really hard to understand with skills or attribute or like who you want to be or how your brain is wired, right? But if we peel the onion back, the brain is just an organ like anything else. And the way it works is through how the neurons are wired. For example, let's just go back to the example of like being open versus, is that a good example? Let's just say like, for example, I'm somebody who it just says yes. I want to say yes more to opportunities that come up. My friend calls me and says, let's go on a spontaneous vacation. And I'm naturally always like saying no. I want to rewire that in my brain to be more like, what's the reaction that happens? Like without thinking, your brain went through 1,000 different scenarios and made a decision. This could happen. You're going to be uncomfortable there. You don't know anybody. It might be dangerous. It might be like expensive. All of these things that come up. Mm-hmm. Now, when I say yes, if it's a good experience, your brain kind of learns that, hey, like I said yes, I rewired that thing and it worked. And the more and more I do it, the faster it gets, the more natural it becomes. Let's think of a different example that's easier to understand. Let's say I'm going to the gym and it's the first time I'm going to the gym after years and I'm going to work out. Like first I'm really working out, like working on the wiring of like just the relationship between my muscles and brain, right? Now, when this feels good, when I go to the gym and work out and it feels good, after a while, I'm not just forcing myself to go to the gym. When I think about going to the gym, my body, my brain is thinking about the feeling it has. So I can focus on it sucks to go to the gym, or I can feel like how great it feels after I'm done working out. Mm-hmm. The more you focus on that feeling, the more reward you feel, and the more your brain wants that feeling. And after a while, you become somebody that's just an athlete, somebody that just goes to the gym. You became that person. But you did that by reinforcing an activity that made your brain kind of rewire that area and say, now I am that person, because the connections got stronger.
So personality-wise in business, if you kind of have a trait or a characteristic that is admirable to you and you want to be more like that, how do you actually influence that change in yourself? Because giving the gym example, there's a reward system for doing that, but how do you do that with personality and interactions, give you the reward system?
Yeah, so personalities are also something I think that over time we really adapted to that. Dr. Joe Spencer has a really good saying around this. I don't remember all of it if I say it correctly, but you can look it up, which is like, an action, whenever you have an action, your nervous system has a responsive period. And in that responsive period, your nervous system is just really like not doing anything else, right? And he kind of talks about how we go from a mood into a behavior into a personality, how your nervous system over time looks at like you're just acting a certain way and you're saying that's your personality, but it's just really behaviors that are wired over really long periods of time, right? So I think recognizing the reason I want to change something, for me, for example, it's like I want to smile more, right? But first step was I didn't even know this is an existing thing. Right? Like when I had people come to me and say, man, like people really don't, like my friends that met you don't really like you. Why? Because you don't smile. I'm like, really? When I heard that a couple of times from different people, I'm like, this is something I don't see. It's my blind spot. So it's something I'd like to change. So I like to smile more. I've even thought about like, how do I remind myself to do that behavior? Maybe having certain triggers that make me do that behavior. I've thought about like, maybe I get a tattoo of a smiley face here. So every time I remember that. But the reason I want to do that is because it makes people around me feel better. Like my intentions might be walking into a room, a meeting, or a conversation, and I want the best thing for that person. Mm-hmm. But the way I'm delivering that message and the way my facial expressions are, it comes off very differently. So I just want to connect more, align more with my intention, which is like, I really want to help in this situation. I need to say it differently. I need to smile more. It's not about how, I just want to say something. It's about how I deliver my intention as well. So I need to understand why this behavior is important. It's going to make a difference in my life, right? Versus, they just told me to smile more. they might be wrong anyways. Like, I'm good the way I am. Like, you just get defensive versus thinking about why that's just a big difference of maker in my life. And I think the rest of it is just really reinforcing that behavior by habits, creating habit loops, like triggers that make you do that.
So if you have somebody on your team that you think is, I guess, demonstrating behaviors or proclivities that are counterproductive to the impact, that they want to make or their goals, how do you influence somebody to maybe look at attempting to, I don't even know how to say this, be a certain way? No, I have real issue with people expecting others to be inauthentic to who they are. And I think while being authentic to who you are, there's also space for improvement, to take feedback and improve and strive to be, always better and stay true to yourself. Like, I'll always come back to that. So how do you employ that in business with people?
Yeah, I think what comes to mind is, like, if I want you to, let's say we're in sales and I want you to demonstrate a behavior that helps you get better results in sales, and you just don't agree with that. Like, that's just not who I am. That's not what I'm going to do. I can never convince somebody by telling them that something is right? Like, you should do it this way or listen to what I'm saying. I've learned this from a couple years of working with my mentors that are like, you should just do this. And I'm like, nope. I really believe in it, and I still actually want to do it. What they've told me I want to do, but somewhere down in my subconscious, I haven't really bought in. It's not my idea, it's their idea. Even if I 100% agree with what they're saying. So I think as a leader, when you're working with somebody, is rather than telling somebody something they should do, by really asking powerful questions and you lead them to their own conclusion, it's way more powerful, right? For example, let's say I want one of my salespeople to smile more, right? By just telling them that, I'll have an effect. By making them come to that conclusion themselves, it's going to have a profound effect that might change, like, that moment. Like, it won't actually make a difference in their life, right? Versus I just told them and they forget about it. They want to do it. They don't want to do it, right? Like, I think it has to be their own idea.
Okay, I'm going to try. What's one of your big personal business goals?
Oh, which one? Personal business goals. I want this podcast to be valuable for a lot of people and I have never thought about a number around, like, how many views or how many downloads we're going to have. Probably should think about that. But one of them is really making this podcast an awesome, valuable thing where people watch weekly.
You're trying to metric it to me.
Yeah, I don't know what metrics to put around that.
Hold ourselves accountable to the impact. Okay, if that's your goal, who is somebody that you admire that's achieved something similar?
Tom Bilyeu.
So I knew you were gonna
By the way, half of my things are just from his podcast, so now you can go watch that one.
Okay. What about Tom Bilyeu do you admire most?
Very good question, because of what I've realized, what I admire in him, not a lot of people actually like. He is very... he can break things down very scientifically and kind of explain the why behind certain things that make a difference. For example, hey, think positive things and it's good for you. We hear that and we believe that is true. I like to know scientifically why, as an example, right? His podcast is a lot about really building the skills and wiring yourself in a way that you can go towards the person you want to be. Now, he's somebody in his own life that demonstrated going from like a nowhere to building $1 billion business, and he's really just paying that forward. And to me, is like he demonstrates it, but also when he talks about it, it's very logical. Now, I've had him sit with people that tapped into the emotional side, and he's actually very open about, like, that's his weakness, and I'm like, maybe that's why I connect with him.
So, okay, let me put that in my brain for the follow-up question. Is anything, any way that Tom Bilyeu is, or behaviorally, or whatever, different than how you view yourself, that you think if you were more like that, essentially, it would help you reach your goals?
Yeah, a little bit of both. Like, a little bit of, yes, I want to be more like that, and a little bit of realizing I need to learn from him and be myself. So one of the lessons I learned from him is you shouldn't want to be like your idols. You should want to beat your idols. Meaning everything you learn, you bring it on, and you're still yourself. You're not going to just copy the other person. So that was my weakness in the beginning. Just like, oh, they do it this way, I'm going to do it this way. Whether it's just like how I design life and how I'm going about like doing like work in life, and then after a while you realize, am I really actually living the life I want? Right? For me, it became a little exhausting, right? So one, realizing I should really look at the things people have that I can learn from and just still make it myself. I don't have to just exactly copy everything. And the things that, there's a lot in him that I'm like, man, if I'm more like that, it's a lot better. For example, I talk in our company a lot about, hey, what are we trying to accomplish in this conversation, in this project, in this endeavor? Like, what problem are you trying to solve? Because one thing I've learned from Tom is, and if you really listen deeply, is like most people don't know what their goal is. Meaning, hey, here's my goal, but like exactly what is your goal? And now every day, like today, what's my goal today to get closer to that? Or in this, like in this podcast, what is our goal in this conversation? Like if we really understand what we're trying to accomplish, we might be able to do it a lot faster, or we might realize that, man, we're just going the completely wrong direction, right? That's one thing I've learned about from him. And I think that comes from having a lot of clarity about this is where I want to go, and really check yourself in every step. I think that is like one of his superpowers.
You said you should want to beat your idol. So are you challenging Tom Bilyeu to it?
Yeah. So like and it's important to understand in what area, right? Like there are things that we might admire, like is it business? Is it like, for example, like one of the things he cherishes the most is his relationship, right? So he's never going to put, something else above the relationship. And someone else might say, yeah, I'm going to beat him in business and lose a lot of relationships in the way. Yeah. So I think it's important to understand like different areas of my life and how each one is important and how I'm going to keep a balance, right? So it's not like I'm just going to beat this person in one area and let everything else go, right? That's easy.
I was trying to be funny, and then you got really, you made it serious in a good way, like real. Like that's actually really insightful. Bookmarked. You said you've seen him interview people that tapped more into the emotional side, and he said that's his weakness, in which also you are recognizing that might be yours. Do you remember who that was? That tapped
it was Tony Robbins.
Isn't that somebody else you admire very much?
So there was a conversation between the two, and it was a conversation about having to help somebody, right? And so Tom Bilyeu has gone from building this billion-dollar business to now having a podcast that really specializes in self-development, human performance. So understanding how I can tap into people and change that is a skill for him to really master right now. And Tony's really good at that. So in this conversation of how you got somebody go from suicidal to like they're not crushing it, a year later, 2 years later, they're still crushing it. How did you create that lasting change? Because it's easy to create the change that just lasts a day or a week, but how do you create that change or in that inspiration that just keeps somebody going? And Tom said, let me give you the answer I think you did. And he kind of explained how, creating certain values that your brain can really understand, and instead of putting that on someone else, this was about her father, and instead of putting those values on her father, she can realize like she can value those values like in herself as well. And she like there was this long answer how logically it worked out. And Tony, so this was like a really powerful moment for me watching these two guys have this conversation. Tom Bilyeu gave this long answer that logically is putting all the mechanical pieces together of how this thing works. And Tony's just watching him, and he's like after a 3-minute explanation, he's like, yeah, that's right. But that's the mechanic side of it. The logical side is that she just don't want to let her father down. Boom. And you could see the reaction in Tom's face. Yeah. Like, okay, that's an emotion that it's there. Like I'm focusing on all the mechanics, but what makes the lasting change is the emotion, is not the mechanics. And I'm very good at understanding mechanics in certain extent. Like I've been in situations where I'm like, hey, you said you want to do this, right? And in order to do this, you got to do this and you got to do that, and you got to have your plan like this is this. And they're just like, hey, he thinks of me as so I'm not doing enough. I'm lazy, right? As in, like a piece in the machine,
right? Like
so that comes from me not being able to being more black and white and not being able to really deliver my intentions of, hey, my only intention is to help you to get to where you want to go. And if you said you want to go here, And maybe I made it so complex and difficult that you just said, I don't want to go there anymore. Right? So I had to get better at tapping to that emotions and connect with my emotional side of like, I'm not here to make this a mechanical, logical thing. I'm here to help you. So how can I help you?
It's interesting you give that example because you're like bringing up core memories for me and like my own professional journey. And one of the best bosses I ever had, her and I became pretty close because we were similar. We just ping pong ideas off of each other and talk about how to influence people and get to the goals, and also very mechanical. And I remember many times, but like one specific conversation, her and I were kind of strategizing something on the phone, and we both laughed, and we were like, we should just be life coaches. Like we could just we know all the steps that everybody should take in life. Obviously being facetious, but like we can just spell out everybody's path, and like the world would be a better place, right? And as we laugh about that, because we both could relate on that like highly mechanical, like big vision level, I don't think. In fact, she was one of the best bosses because she never told me what to do, ever. She just asked me questions that got the result and then would be like, great, go do it. And then she would follow up, but not in a like hovering way. She'd just be like, hey, how's it going? You know, like, and I felt an accountability because it was my job to do well. And because she gave me that trust, I felt inspired to not break that trust. So anyways, that was her leadership style. Behind the curtain, we both were like, hey, here are all the really mechanical steps that we know this person needs to do better. But neither one of us ever employed that tactic in, you know, leading said person that we may have been discussing. I don't even know if it was a specific person. And this is something I definitely learned and picked up from her over time. Like we never went to that person and gave them the steps. We backed into it through a relationship and just kind of walked alongside them and guided and asked questions to get them to figure out the steps. And sometimes the steps were different than maybe even we had in our own head. But the relationship side, the tapping into the emotional side of somebody instead of just like, here's your list of things. If you just follow this, if you just follow the steps, you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So Tony Robbins is more on the emotional side, and that's where you feel like you could improve.
Yeah, so I've heard Tony say in his career, in the beginning, he really cared about the science of it, which is a lot of brain science and a lot of psychology. And I'm very interested in that. And that's why maybe I'm like really interested in Tom Bilyeu, because he's all about, this is how the brain works, this is why you think this way, this is how you can rewire it. And I've always wondered why Tony doesn't talk more about that, because I know like he takes the complex and make it so simple to give to masses and masses can follow. I'm like, but you can take that complex, you can take that simple and explain the logic behind it and all of that, and makes people... And I've heard Tony say, you know, in the beginning, I cared about the science behind it, but I realized people don't. And the more I explain it, the less I get people interested in it. And I just had to break it into simple emotional things. So, see, he got clear with his goal. Is my goal to make people understand I'm right? Or am I just trying to move them from A to B and make a lasting long change? Like because of that, I need to make it less complex. I need to change my methods. Because you got to focus on what the goal is rather than what the method is. And I love Tom Bilyeu, but over the last few months, I've kind of been like, it's a little mechanical, right? Like I've got to a point where I'm like, I've really modeled a lot of things after him and I can feel it. It's a little exhausting. And I love the guy. Now I'm at the point of like, what can I learn from him and improve other areas where I can still be connected to where I want to go with that.
So I have a question about something you said. So we're talking about nurture and like nurturing somebody to reach their goals, essentially. Like nature is what it is, and then nurture is our experiences and influence that shape who we are. So in leadership and business, we're nurturing people to their goals. So many people have this belief, and I do, like you take advice and guidance from people who've either done the same thing before you or something similar. You establish credibility, right? Like I'm not just making this up on a whim, like I know what I'm talking about and you should listen to me because, and that's not how you deliver the message, obviously, but there's a period of time that you have to establish credibility for somebody to want to follow you or be led by you. And I think both of our brains go to like mechanical, factual. It is true because look, when XYZ was applied, the outcome was this, and that's the outcome you want. So just do XYZ and you're good. How do you balance establishing credibility without just spitting facts and mechanics at somebody to get them to trust you?
Yeah, that's a balance that's a little difficult to achieve, and I think there's three components. One is the mechanics, like the proof, right? Like, hey, I've done it. Here's the proof. This is why you should listen to me. Third is they care. I care about, like, there's how many people you know that you're like, they're really good at what they're talking about, I just don't care about listening to them, versus people that, like, I have no idea what the background is even, but what they're saying really resonates with me, because you feel that connection, that care, that love, right? And it could be one-on-one, it could be in groups. And third is, so it's the mechanic, the proof of it, the caring of it, and the third is, I had the third in my mind that I made up, but I forgot right now.
Relationships, emotion.
We're gonna have to cut here because I there was a good one. I just made it up on the spot though.
How do you establish
Oh,
credibility?
vulnerability.
No, we don't have to cut it. We're
Okay.
not going to cut it.
So this
we're
is
real here.
vulnerability. So it's like,
Speak
how
up.
many people I've listened to that when they actually share, like, I know people that come on stage and like, this guy built $1 billion business, and they immediately go like very little about the proof and quickly go into, now let me tell you the story. I didn't start there, and now we can all connect.
Yeah.
Right? Now I want to connect because now I don't see a superhero on stage or on this video. I see somebody that's just like me. Now you have things to teach me because you're not different than me. You're not special. You just overcame challenges that I'm trying to overcome. So I think I need to give you a little bit of proof, but not a lot of it, because that's where I lose you. Little of proof, and now I need to come down and really just be vulnerable. I know people in my life, I really can think of people that I've like admire virtually or I've seen on stage, but also people that I know closely in my life that I work with, that I can see how successful they are, and when they talk about like the challenges and the vulnerability and the story and how it was 10 years ago, I'm like, wow, I can really connect to that. I'm more inspired by that. I want to learn more about you. I want to learn from you and copy what you're doing. Like, I just feel more connected when I can see the human side of you.
Do you think that we're naturally drawn to people who have similar stories and backgrounds as us because we can kind of relate and then through them see what a better future could look like?
I think yes, and also the journey. Like, if there's a journey I want to go on, I'm going to connect with people that are on that journey or have gone down that journey. Whether it's trying to overcome something in business, in life, in a relationship, like people that have gone through that, you want to learn from.
So I have a follow-up question. Do you think that people can change who they are?
Yeah. Yes, and I've learned, if you asked me this question a few years ago, I would say yes, everybody can change and they can do whatever they want to do. I've learned to be, the reality of that is anybody can change. Not everybody will, right? So I had to learn, one, I don't specialize in changing people, right? Like, I specialize in, like, I'm going this path, and I love to go down the path with you and help you any way I can. But I don't specialize in, like, changing you. So you have to really want to come down this path yourself. And second, if you look at the world of self-development, the people that are in this space talk about, my message resonates with 2% of the people. So the 2% are all of my audience and people that come in. I'm trying to, like, create change within the 2%, and that's difficult. I'm not even looking at the 3% or the other 98%. So understanding that change is hard, but it's very possible. Even personality, like, there's all these debates of whether personalities are permanent or not. I lean towards, like, nothing is really permanent, but really rewiring who you are at the surface is easy. The deeper you go is more difficult. You just have to do the work.
How do you know? Because again, I'm gonna hop back on the therapy couch again. Back to my personal struggle of, like, approaching, I guess, hot button issues with a level of force or kind of a step back and more of a calmness. How do you know if the change that you're wanting to kind of implement, I want to be more like this, is actually the right choice, is actually what's going to get the result that you want?
Yeah, I think just looking at, why you want that change, and people that, like, let's say I'm in a relationship and I want to be a better listener. And I might say, well, every time I listen in these conversations or when we get a little heated, the other person is wrong. Why do I have to listen? Like, you might question, right? Like, you might not know things that are, like, outside your blind spot, but also you might tend to, like, go to your old ways. I think looking at evidence, like, these are the people that have good relationships. Like, I don't want to just be a better listener. I want a better relationship, right? And what are they doing? What are they modeling that I should be open to There are things I know I should 100% follow, and there are things I should be open to, right? There are definitely things that might be as that part of that I don't agree with. I just have to be open to them and try them. And I think ultimately, going down a certain path is not absolute. Is not I'm not going down the whole path. I'm going to go a little bit, and if I don't like it, I can turn around. I can go halfway and realize it's not the right way to go. However, one thing that happens with a lot of people I've noticed, they start to go down the right path, and then somewhere down the road, fear or comfort in the old way sets in, and they're just kind of revolt against the whole journey, right? Like, hey, I was right anyways, right? And those are the times, usually within 3 months, where you really have to reconnect and be honest with yourself and not let fear or their take over and kind of shut you down.
So I think any dynamic between any two people or more than one person is a relationship. Now, how significant that relationship is in your life, it's somebody I talk to once a year versus every single day. Like, there's a significance of it, but everything's in a relationship. So when you say in a relationship, if I want to be a better listener, it's because I want a better relationship. I liken that to business, personal, whatever. You can model after others who have the dynamic that you're seeking and try to implement some of the things that they do. But I think there's a lot of value in also asking the other person, what do you need from me to help reach your goals? And even in a relationship, even if it's a romantic relationship, if their goal is, well, I want a better relationship too. I want to feel a stronger connection. And through the way I think you can support that in your role is by being a better listener. On the leadership front, if you want better results from somebody you're leading or want them to achieve their goal, is there value in saying, what do you need from me? Here's what I see for you. Here's some feedback I have for you. What do you need from me as your leader to help, facilitate that change? You're talking about, in sales, you're talking about sometimes behavioral changes. And sometimes I think giving the mechanics, giving the proof, giving the steps, and just being supportive and having a relationship may not be enough for everybody. So is there value in kind of asking somebody, how can I support you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of times when we're in a certain situation, we know the answer. We know how to get out. We know all the right things to do. It's really getting yourself to do that and aligning with, for example, there's been situations where I'm like, I know I need to get up and do this other thing to feel better or to do certain things to move forward in business. And it's easy to know that, and it's easy to always give other people advice, right? So I think through asking somebody questions as a leader in that conversation, you're really helping them really come to a realization that they know things already. I was listening to this psychotherapist talk about an experience of death for people that are terminally ill, and there is a documentary on Disney, Limitless, with Chris Hemsworth. If you watch that, the last episode is about acceptance and death. That episode might change your life. I listened to Asher on our team say that, mention that, kind of drop it in, and after I watched it, I was going to text everybody, everybody need to watch this. And one of the things that changes in people, let's say you're terminally ill, you need to live life to the fullest. You don't have much time. You have to just look at the positives. So this, but getting yourself to do that is really impossible. Yeah. So they were talking about certain experiences they have to take people through. That is you could have told them this a million times, but for the first time, instead of intellectually saying it, very it's very subconscious. You can really connect with that now. I think that's the difference. I've heard Tony say this a lot, Tony Robbins. If you think you know something and you don't do it, you really don't know it, and you have to understand that you don't know it and be open to that. I can explain certain things really well and how the mechanics of certain things work in the business, but until I go do it, I don't really know it because I'm not really implementing it, right? And I think the power of asking somebody questions instead of just telling them is you're giving them the opportunity to really believe that in something they knew already. They know what you're going to say. You need to get them to come to that realization themselves, because that's more actionable down the road. They're going to implement on that versus whatever you tell them. And this is the most difficult thing as a leader, by the way. We want to tell everybody, you should do this, you should do that, don't make that mistake, versus allowing people to really operate within their own strengths and make some mistakes and giving them room. This is that balance between results and relationships in a leader that's a forever balancing act that you're doing for the rest of your
Walking
career.
a little tightrope there. Yeah. I think most people don't want to just be told the steps to do. I think most people want to have a say and influence, even if they're like, hey, I don't need to be on a podium giving a speech, but I have thoughts. I'm a human. I'm creative. I can problem solve too. And I know what I've seen, even with people on my team and teams in the past, is when I could sit on day one and be like, here are the 25 things. If we do it this year, it's going to be amazing. And sometimes the only frustration is like, I knew what the answer was and we didn't do it. But it's because people don't have the buy-in themselves. Like so many experiences, hindsight is 2020. When like the thing finally happens, you look back and you're like, oh, it's because they had to get themselves there. Like you can, spitting off random facts. You have to eat healthy so you can have, longevity and health and wellness. Like everybody knows that.
Yeah.
But not many people actually execute it. And usually the people who do execute that really well is because they've had something happen to them or it's just something within them that pulls them to that. Like knowing something factually and knowing something that motivates you to change are two totally different things. And I think that's what I hear you saying.
Absolutely. There needs to be enough pain or something I'm going towards that makes that change. When there is enough pain, I'll make that change. Or there's something I'm really driving towards, that pleasure side of it, right? Like I really want something. For example, I might have a terminal, like I might have a disease where if I don't change what I eat, it's going to really make my life worse. That's leverage. Now that leverage it's going to make it easier to change. Yeah. Or, hey, if I want to do this big thing in my life, I need to get up every day and have the most amount of energy. And if I want to do that, I need to eat healthy. Like that might be enough force to drive me towards something. Usually pain is the stronger force in people's lives. Now you can create that leverage. You don't have to wait for pain to really hit you. So I have, I don't eat sugar as much as possible. I'm strict with my diet at times, right? Like meaning the last 5 years, 6 years actually, several years of it, I was so strict that people were like, how are you so strict with your diet? How do you control yourself to do that? And to me, it was really puzzling because it was easy. But I realized, so I have this skin condition. I went to the doctor and he's like, hey, listen, there's not direct evidence, but look into sugar relationship with this condition. And I went and read up on it and I decided, so a belief is something that, you can decide something is true or not. For example, hey, your actions will get you results. Your adaptation machine. That might not be true. We might find out science comes back 10 years from now and says that's not true. But if I believe that and take certain actions, it might get me closer to my goal. So I can choose what I'm believing. So I decided at that moment, one day down the road, they'll find out if this research is really true or not. Right now, we don't know that. But I'm going to assume this is 100% true. I'm just going to take it as is. That sugar has a direct correlation with this condition I have. I'm just going to cut out sugar. I love ice cream. It is my weakness. But it was so easy for a long time to go somewhere and like people like eat this or have dessert with us or do this or do that. And I just absolutely have no desire because I forced that leverage on myself. I didn't have to wait for the skin condition to get worse. I just create that in my head. And that gave me so much leverage. So I would look at the bowl of ice cream and think of my skin condition getting to the worst it could be. And immediately I'm like, no, I'm good. So you can design that leverage in a way you want. That's going towards positive or really avoiding a negative. You don't have to wait for that to come to you.
So what I'm taking away from our conversation today is I think I still believe that nature is not as much of an influence in our lives and the outcomes of our lives, reaching goals and whatnot. And it's very heavily reliant on nurture. And what I'm hearing you say is nurture also is like you're self-nurturing, like, right? You're influencing yourself by setting yourself up in a certain, with certain conditions or reflecting on something painful or that you don't want to kind of nurture your brain into doing the thing that you do want to do, that will take you where you're going. So, that's, I think, my biggest takeaway is that like our mindset and our experiences and our influences really have the power to dictate, the outcomes of our life and in business.
A story came to my mind, maybe to wrap up with the story. There was a crash. I don't remember all the details. I'm going to have a laptop here next time. There was a crash a Korean airline had many, many years ago, and they crashed into a mountain. and we listen to the black box, this is fascinating. This is mind blowing. You could hear, like, you knew people that knew exactly what's going to happen in the cockpit, and they just didn't say anything. I mean, you risk your life. You at one point you know you're going to die, and you still didn't say anything. Why? Korea and Iran went down this path of figuring out what went wrong, and they realized, man, the way our culture works has an effect in the cockpit, where somebody that knows they're about to die doesn't raise their voice against authority, and that just cannot work in an airline. Right? You need to break past the cultural influence, the nurture side of things, and get into, dude, I'm about to die. Don't crash into this mountain. Sorry for yelling on this podcast.
Letting nature take over, like the instinctual.
Right? Like how do we get, like, how we have our Korean pilots get past that cultural norm and do their job? Even if their own life is in line, they wouldn't step past that. So one of the easiest implementation they did is they banned Korean in the cockpit. Everybody had to speak English, from the air traffic controllers to the pilots. Believe it or not, that has an effect. That has a change.
Psychologically.
Exactly, right? Because it's easier in English to step over that authority, I guess, right? So understanding.
Loudmouth people.
Yeah. So understanding how much power that nurture has on you, that somebody is willing to die. It's easy for me and you to sit here and say, we would never do that. We wouldn't die over this thing. But now imagine you were raised in Korea and you lived all your life there and you know nothing about that culture, and put yourself in that situation. You would do exactly what that other person did, right? So understanding that's how much it's really affecting your life. So the question of how much of it is my DNA and how much of it is nurture, I think at that point is like, it's irrelevant. I just need to believe that changing my nurture by working on things, going towards the things I want, I can really build the behaviors I want to, and that will have an effect on my life. It will change my life, is the belief I need to have. That's one of the extreme examples that come to mind, that, man, like, people don't even step outside of their nurture to save their own lives, let alone other people's life. Like, that's crazy.
That is so fascinating, and just, yeah, really demonstrates the power that nurture has. Like, and sometimes it could be to the negative. Wow.
Yeah.
It's good.
Good conversation today.
Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. Until next time, be better every day.